By the third night of the Blueknife Norther, Cinderbreak Hold had vanished. The north wind ran near 40 miles an hour. The cold had fallen to 8 below. Snow erased the fence posts until the cabin could not be seen from the dugout door. Above the shelter, the chimney cowl had turned sideways. Smoke pushed back into the room. Merritt clipped the repair bag to the guide rope and put the other end in Ada's hands. If the stove died, they would choose between smoke and cold. Behind the curtain, Ada had reached the last stage of labor. June counted between the panes and watched the roof mark. Cal Dacey, who had called the shelter a prairie grave, lay barely awake by the stove. The mule kicked at the drift. The rope pulled 3 times. Then it went slack. 5 weeks earlier, Merritt had found her holding a collapsing tent with one hand and shielding her daughter with the other. How had the stranger he ordered into his wagon become the one who knew whether the shelter would hold? On the 7th of October, 1893, Merritt Quade came down from the rotten timber with 200 pounds of traps, 1 tired mule, and a cold front overtaking his wagon. He had felt the change before he saw it. The upper air went still in the wrong way, the way it did before the north broke loose off the mesa. Then the deer he passed on the switchback turned their backs to the north and set their feet, and he did not need a barometer after that. Animals read a norther before a man could. Merritt had learned to believe them. He pushed the mule harder than he liked down the last grade to Black Kettle Flats. The wind was still only a rumor up in the pines, a long sound with no direction yet. He had maybe 2 hours, enough to reach the cabin, close the shutters, and let the front pass over him. He had done it a dozen winters alone. Then he saw the tent. It stood a 1/4 mile off the wagon cut, on open ground where no one with sense would pitch canvas. A wall tent, patched and repatched, gone gray with weather. The north side had already caved. As Merritt watched, a stake pulled loose and the whole wall bellied in like a lung giving out. A woman fought it. She had one hand fisted in the guy line and the other braced against the ridge, and she was losing to the wind by inches. She was heavy with child. Even at that distance he could see it in the way she moved, careful and slow where the wind wanted her quick. Inside, through the open flap, a small girl held the center pole with both arms wrapped around it, the way a child holds a thing she has been told not to let go of. Merritt turned the wagon off the cut without deciding to. He pulled up hard and set the brake. The woman did not look at him. She was watching a second stake work itself out of the ground. "Leave it," Merritt said. "I can hold it." Her voice was steady and wrong, the steadiness of someone running on the last of themselves. "You can't." He came around the wagon. "That's a north wind building. In an hour it'll take the canvas and you with it." "Then help me stake it." "No." She turned then. Her face was chapped raw across both cheeks, and her lips had gone the color of the sky. She looked at him the way a cornered animal looks at a wall. Merritt did not explain. He drew his knife and cut the last guy line himself. The woman lunged for the collapsing canvas. "Don't. I'm not leaving it." He caught the ridge as it fell, rolled the whole wet weight of it into his arms, and heaved it into the wagon bed, poles and all. "I'm loading it. There's a difference." She stood with her empty hands still shaped around the shape of the pole. The girl crept out of the ruined tent and pressed against her mother's leg. "Get in my wagon," Merritt said. The woman did not move. "I don't know you." "You know the wind." He lifted the girl up over the sideboard before either of them could argue. She weighed almost nothing. "She's already in it. You coming or not?" For a moment he thought she would refuse and freeze on principle. Then she put her hand on the wagon and climbed up without letting him touch her, hauling herself over the board with a grunt she tried to swallow. Merritt released the brake. Behind them, the first true gust came off the mesa and flattened the grass where the tent had stood. He did not ask her name. He watched the north and drove. Cinderbreak Hold sat where a spring came up below a south-facing hill, a poor claim by any honest measure. One room of log and stone, a trap shed, a pen with a single mule and 2 goats already turned tail to the coming weather. Merritt got them all inside as the sleet started, and only then, in the lamplight, did he see how far gone the 2 of them were. The girl's fingers had gone white to the second knuckle. The woman was worse and hid it better. Merritt built the fire up and set the iron pot on before he took off his own coat. He had cornmeal, a little salt pork, dried beans he'd been meaning to soak. He made broth the fast way from what was already cooked and poured the first cup for the girl. "Small sips," he said. "Burns going down when you're that cold." The girl looked at her mother. Only when the woman nodded did she drink. Merritt filled a second cup and held it out. The woman took it in both hands and did not drink. "I can pay for this," she said. "Nobody asked you to." "I'm asking me to." She set the cup on her knee. "My name is Ada Corder. This is June. My husband filed a claim east of here before he died. I have a mule and his tools and his ledger and that tent you threw in your wagon. I sold everything else to a man who took my money and left us short of the line." She said it flat, like reading a bill of lading. "I don't beg. Give June broth and a corner out of the wind, and I'll mend every cover you own, keep your stores, and pay back the flour before spring." Merritt looked at her a long moment. Outside, the sleet had found the chimney, and a gust drove down it and pushed a curl of smoke back into the room. He watched Ada's eyes go to it before his did. "The broth comes first," Merritt said. "Your bargain can wait until morning." Ada drank then, because the argument was over and the cup was warm, and her body knew what her pride did not. June had finished hers. Merritt watched the girl break the corner of a biscuit he'd set out, eat half, and slide the other half up her sleeve when she thought no one was looking. He said nothing. He had seen men do the same in mine camps that were closing down, hoard against a tomorrow they had stopped believing in. The wind found the chimney again. The smoke rolled back thicker this time and hung in the room. "Your chimney draws backward on a north wind," Ada said. "It's drawn that way 9 years." "Then you've been lucky 9 years." She was looking at the ceiling, at the low beams, at the one bed shoved into the corner, and the rest of the room gone over to stacked hides and traps. "There's no room in here for a woman to be brought to bed, no clean corner, no place for a cradle, and that smoke will only get worse the colder it gets." Merritt had known the cabin was small. He had never once thought of it as a room a child might be born in. He looked at Ada's belly, at June asleep against the wall with a biscuit up her sleeve, and something in the arithmetic of his winter changed. "How long?" he said. "Before the child. A midwife would know better than me." Ada set down the empty cup. 5 weeks, perhaps less. Outside, the Norther settled in for the night, and Merritt sat listening to a smoke he had lived with for 9 years and never once had reason to fix. The first front blew through in a day and a night and left the flats hard and glittering. Merritt was up before light, and when he came in from the pen, Ada was already at the stove, feeding it small so it would draw. "I want to see the ground," she said. "All of it. If I'm to keep your stores, I need to know what you have and where the water is and what leaks." "And I want to see if you can stitch," Merritt said. He pulled a cracked pack saddle strap off its peg and dropped it on the table. The billet had torn clean through at the buckle. "Owen's tools are in your wagon. Mend that so it holds a loaded saddle, and we have a bargain. Fail it, and I'll still feed the girl. But then it's charity, and you said you don't beg." Ada picked up the strap and turned it to the light. She ran her thumb along the old stitching, feeling where it had been done poorly the first time. "By noon," she said. He showed her the claim while she worked it over in her head. The spring below the hill, the trap shed, the smokehouse, and then, cut into the south-facing slope, a raw, square hole braced with a few poles. An 8x10 storage chamber he'd started 2 winters back and never finished, half full of traps and salt and a bin of potatoes. I keep hides down here, Merritt said. Stays cool in summer. The back of it never freezes. There's better than 4 feet of hill sitting on the rear of it. He rapped the earthen wall. Cold can't get through that fast. Neither can wind. Ada stepped inside past the traps. She did not admire it. She pressed her palm flat against the back wall and held it there, and then she looked at her hand. What's under the front? She asked. Poles. Brush. It's temporary. A woman can't be brought to bed under temporary. She wiped her hand on her apron. But the back is sound. You're right about the earth. She looked up at the pole roof, at the light coming through it in threads. If the front were built as well as the hill, a body could live down here, warmer than that cabin, and no smoke blowing back on a newborn. Merritt had thought of the cache as a hole for hides. He looked at it now the way she was looking at it. You think it could hold the winter, he said. I think it could hold worse than the winter if it's built right. Ada turned for the entrance. And I think if it's built wrong, it becomes exactly what a fool would call it. A grave with a chimney. Show me your timber. At noon, she set the mended strap on the table. Merritt hung a full saddle from it and put his own weight on top and bounced. The old billet Owen had double-stitched years ago held without a creak. Ada's new work held beside it. That'll do, Merritt said, which from him was a good deal. Ada was already looking at the cache through the open door. You have 1 week of easy weather, maybe 2, she said. After that, the Northers stopped being warnings. They cleared the cache that night by lamplight, hauling traps and salt and the potato bin up to the shed, and by the second evening, Merritt had a bed frame knocked together and the little iron stove carried down and set on flat stones. He sealed every crack he could find with clay, proud of the work, and lit the fire, and the 3 of them sat in the earth-walled room while it warmed. Within the hour, the lamp went dim. The walls beaded with wet. June, tucked in the new bed, grew heavy-lidded and slow, her words trailing off in the middle. Merritt felt only that it was warm at last, and warm seemed like the whole of the thing. Ada stood, opened the door to the cold, and pinched the lamp out. "What are you doing?" Merritt said. "You'll let the heat—" "The heat's not the problem." She crouched by June and rubbed the girl's hands until her eyes cleared. "Look at your lamp. It went low before June did. A flame starves on the same air a child does. You've built a room that holds heat and holds bad air just the same, and bad air is what makes a body sleepy in a shut room." She left the door cracked. Cold poured in, and the lamp, relit, burned clean and tall. "Your cabin never poisoned you because it leaks like a sieve. Seal a room this tight and you have to give it air on purpose." Merritt did not like being corrected in front of the child. He liked less that she was right, and that he could see she was right the moment she said it, in the way the flame answered. "So we cut a hole in a wall we just sealed," he said. 2 holes. 1 low, to bring air in near the floor where it's cold anyway. 1 high at the far end to let the used air out. She held her palm near the floor, then up by the roof poles. "Warm and foul rises. Give it a door up top, and clean air a door below, and the room breathes without going cold." They bored the low intake that night and knocked a temporary vent through the pole roof at the far end. Merritt watched the lamp the whole time, and when it held tall and steady with the door shut, he stopped arguing. June had watched the whole of it from the bed, the man wrong, the woman right, and the man doing the work anyway without sulking. She said nothing. But when Merritt passed her to bank the stove, she moved her feet to give him room, which she had not done before. Late, when June slept, Merritt banked the fire and set 2 tin cups on the stone shelf by the stove out of old habit, then caught himself and reached to put one back. "Leave them," Ada said from the dark. "I take mine before June wakes." He left them, outside, the cold held clear and hard, and somewhere east a midwife named Pilar Mestas did not yet know she had 5 weeks of work coming. Pilar Mestas came on the 3rd day, riding a shaggy pony up from the settlement east of the mesa, and she did not waste breath being kind. "You're carrying low and you're worn thin," she told Ada after. "The low means it won't be long past its time. The thin means you'll want to be somewhere warm and clean when it comes, not somewhere you're proud of." She looked around the half-built cache without approval or scorn. 4 weeks, maybe 5. If the north edge ever turns blue-black under the cloud, don't send a man for me after the snow starts. He won't reach me and I won't reach you. Make the room ready before the sky does. Then she was gone, and the clock she left behind ticked louder than the one before. Merritt turned to the roof. The front section, the exposed part, needed to carry earth without sagging, and the only material long enough to span it was the willow and the poles, and the canvas. "I need your tent," he said. June had been counting rope on the floor. She stood up fast. "That's my father's." "June," Ada said. "It's his. It's the last." The girl stopped. She did not have the words for what it was the last of. Ada knelt, which cost her, and took the rolled canvas from the corner. She did not argue with the child. She unrolled it, found the one panel the weather had spared, and folded it around June's shoulders like a shawl. "This part keeps you," Ada said. "The torn part keeps all of us." She laid her hand on the damaged section. "Your father made this to be shelter. It's still shelter. It's only changing shape." June held the good panel around herself and watched her mother cut the ruined half into strips. She did not stop crying, but she stopped protesting, and after a while she brought Ada the shears when they fell. While they worked the canvas, Merritt sent June out with a charcoal stub and a stick cut to length. "Measure me the span between those 2 posts," he said, not expecting much. "Butt of the stick to the post, mark where the end lands, and count the sticks." She came back and reported it exactly, twice, the same both times. "You count true," Merritt said. It surprised him. Most grown men round it off and lie about it. June looked at the ground, but the next morning she was waiting by the post with the stick before he asked. That afternoon, moving trap baskets in the cabin, June found 2 lengths of pale ash wood, carved and sanded smooth. The shape of them curved like the sides of something. She held one up. "What's this?" Merritt crossed the room, took both pieces out of her hands without a word, and carried them back into the dark of the cabin. He did not say what they were. He did not need to. Ada had already seen the curve of them, and the way his shoulders set as he put them away, and she said nothing at all. That night a warm wind came up out of the south, unseasonable and soft, and by morning the frost was off the ground, and the earth around the cache had begun to give. June found it first. She was checking her charcoal line on the front post, the one Merritt had told her to mark and watch, and the line no longer sat where she had drawn it. "It moved past my mark," she said. Merritt came and looked. The post had settled. The whole loaded front section of roof, had dropped near 2 inches, and the warm ground around the post base had gone soft as pudding where he'd set it straight onto bare soil. "Then your mark saved us from sleeping under it," Merritt said. He did not make excuses. He stood looking at his own bad work with his hands on his hips, and then he said, "I set the post on dirt. Dirt holds fine when it's froze, and fine when it's dry. It doesn't hold a wet roof and a thaw at the same time. That's my miss." Cal Dacey rode in while they were staring at it, a young hand off the Rell Ranch, sent with word that August Rell wanted to talk terms again about the spring. Cal took one look at the sagging roof and the hole in the hill and grinned. "That what I think it is?" Cal said. "You put a chimney on a grave and moved a family into it. Quade's prairie grave." He laughed at his own line. "Mr. Rell says—" "Tell Rell no," Merritt said, not turning around. "Same as last winter." Cal rode off, still grinning. Merritt did not watch him go. He was already up on the roof, stripping the sod back off the sagging span, and Ada and June were carrying it away by the basketful, and no one defended anything to anybody. They levered the ridge beam back up level. Merritt dug down and set broad, flat stones under the post feet, footings the soft ground couldn't swallow, and tied a cross piece between the 2 front posts so they'd stand or fall together instead of one at a time. Then he refused to reload the roof for 3 days, and each of those 3 mornings June checked her charcoal line and reported it. "Same," she said the first day. "Same," she said the second. "Same," she said the third, and only then did Merritt begin laying the sod back. But the warm spell had done more than soften a post. On the 4th morning, Ada pressed her hand to the rear wall, the sound wall, the one they trusted, and found a dark patch spreading low, cold, and wet, where meltwater off the hilltop had found its way down through the earth and in. August Rell's complaint reached the territorial road supervisor before Merritt's roof was even reloaded, and so Ephraim Sloan came up the wagon cut on a gray mule, 61 years old, a former mine timber foreman who had spent 30 years watching props hold and props fail. He did not laugh at the dugout. That was the first thing Merritt noticed. Sloan walked around it twice, slow, and then he started asking questions Merritt could not wave off. "What carries the front load?" Sloan said. "2 peeled ridge timbers on posts. Posts on stone now, not dirt." "Now," Sloan repeated, meaning they weren't. He crouched and looked at the new footings without comment. "What happens to that back wall when the ground above it freezes solid, and then a stove runs 3 days behind it?" "It stays cold and dry," Merritt said. "It's wet right now," Ada said, before Merritt could dig himself deeper. "There, we found it this morning. We haven't fixed it yet. I won't tell you it's dry when you can see it isn't." Sloan looked at Ada for the first time, and something in his face shifted a degree. "Where does your runoff go?" he asked her. "Nowhere good yet. That's the wet wall." "How does fresh air come in when both doors are shut?" "Low intake on the sheltered side, high vent at the far end. The lamp holds tall with the room closed. We tested it." "Can that stove reverse its draft when the wind crosses the pipe?" Ada paused. "I don't know." "Then you'll find out in the worst possible hour unless you learn it first." Sloan straightened. He looked at Merritt. "I don't believe this room will hold. Not through a real norther. Not with a woman brought to bed inside it. I've pulled better-built rooms out from on top of better men." Merritt met his eye. "You should not believe it," he said. "Not until it does." Sloan almost smiled. "Fair answer." He pulled a small book from his coat and set it on the stump by the door. You want me to sign this off as fit for a berth. You give me proof, not talk. Temperature morning and night, inside and out. Every armload of wood you burn. Every time that back wall wets. Every time the roof line moves. 3 weeks of it. Numbers convert me. Nothing else will. I'll keep it, Ada said, and took the book. Sloane looked at her keeping it, not Merritt, and nodded once as if that answered a question he hadn't asked aloud. Extend that stovepipe above the roof line and put a turning cowl on it, he said, mounting up. A short pipe reverses in a crosswind. When it does, it'll fill the room with smoke on the coldest night you've got. Don't learn that the hard way. He turned the mule. 3 weeks. I'll be back before the deep cold. That night, Ada opened the book to the first blank page and began to write the numbers down in Owen's small square hand, which she had learned from watching him keep the freight accounts, and June sat beside her and read out the thermometer while Ada wrote. The first real cold test came a week on. A clear, still night, the stars hard as chips of ice, and the thermometer nailed by the cabin door falling and falling. 9 above, June read at dawn, breath smoking. They went down to the dugout. Inside, before Merritt touched the stove, June read the inside glass. 58, she said. 58, Ada wrote. Outside, 9. She looked at the numbers. 49 degrees the earth in the built room had held against the sky, on wood alone. And the curtain corner? June ducked behind the canvas. 66. Merritt looked at the wood box. He had burned 4 armloads through the night to hold the room. In the cabin, an open colder night like this one used to cost him 7. 4, he said, not 7. He said it the way another man might say a prayer. But the room was not perfect, and the ledger did not let him pretend it was. The rear wall still showed damp near the floor, and when June went to open the high vent to clear the morning's stale air, the wooden shutter would not budge, swollen with the night's moisture, then frozen fast in its guide. It's stuck, June said, hauling on it. Merritt tried it and could not free it either. He stood back and looked at it, and this time he named the fault before Ada could. I built the guide out of wood, he said. Wood swells when it's wet, and everything in this room is wet till we fix that wall. I missed it. You promised to fix it, Ada said, not unkindly. You never promised to guess right the first time. He replaced the wooden guide with a strap of greased leather that would flex instead of swell, and the shutter slid free after, wet or dry. That night, clearing the supper things, Ada found half of June's biscuit lying on the shelf beside her plate. Not up a sleeve, not hidden, just left there, forgotten, because for one whole day the girl had not thought about tomorrow at all. Ada did not say anything. She set the half biscuit back by June's place, as though a portion had always belonged there, and went on with the dishes. Late, when the others slept, Merritt lit a stub of candle at the cabin bench, took down one of the 2 curved ash pieces, and began cutting the shape of a rocker to match it. Ada saw the light under the door. She did not go in. 10 days out from the deep cold, August Rell came in person, riding a good horse and wearing a good coat, and made his offer plain. I'll buy the spring and the claim both, Rell said, not getting down. More than it's worth, seeing what's on it now. His eyes went to Ada, to her belly, and back to Merritt. A man alone can winter in a hole in a hill. A woman and a child and a baby coming can't. You know that. Take the money while it's offered, and take them somewhere with 4 walls and a real roof. No, Merritt said. Rell's jaw tightened. Your spring's the only cold season water between my east and west range. I've offered fair 3 times. This is the last of it. He gathered his reins. The cut across my flat closes to your wagon as of today. You want supplies, you go the long way round, 28 miles instead of 12. In this weather, that's a good deal more than double, Think on it." He rode off across the flat he had just closed. Merritt came inside and did the arithmetic out loud. "Long way round, one supply run before the deep cold if the weather holds. Say 19 days of everything, and pray." Ada opened the ledger. 19 days is a guess. Guessing is what we're trying to stop doing. She ran her finger down the wood column. At 4 armloads a night, we have 22 days of dry wood. Flour, 26 days at what June and I actually eat, not what you fear we eat. Mule feed, 28. Lamp oil, 19 nights unless we put the lamp out after midnight, then 28. She looked up. The child could come on the coldest day of any of it. If the road stays shut and the berth is hard, 19 days is a story we tell ourselves so we can sleep. 26 is what the numbers say. We prepare for 26. Merritt looked at the columns, at Owen's small, square hand copied out in her own. He'd spent his life trusting his gut about weather and wood. The numbers were harder to argue with and easier to bet a child's life on. 26, he agreed. They spent the next days as if for a siege. Merritt strung a guide rope shoulder high from the dugout to the cabin, and a branch of it to the mule pen, with posts set 18 feet apart and red cloth tabs hung below the rope where the wind would tear at them least. 3 knots for the dugout way, 1 knot for the cabin. He fixed a sliding loop for the repair bag, and June tied the red tabs while Ada spliced the line with Owen's stitch. June came to Merritt while he drove the last post. "I found more wood on your bench," she said. "Curved, like the pieces you took." She did not ask what he was making. She had begun to guess. Merritt drove the post. "Then it's coming along," was all he said. On the 9th morning after Rel closed the cut, June woke before the others and went out to read the glass. She came back and stood in the dugout door without speaking until her mother looked up. The northern sky had gone hard and colorless. The light drained out of it, and low along the top of the mesa, a band of blue-black had begun to gather beneath the cloud, the exact color Pilar Mestas had named. Ada set down the ledger and pressed both hands low against her belly. "The child's dropped," she said quietly. "Since yesterday. Lower." Far up in the timber, above the flats, Merritt heard the wind begin to move through the pines before it reached the ground, a long sound with a direction to it now. He looked at the room they had built, and the rope, and the cradle he had not finished, and the woman with her hands beneath the child. "Then we're done getting ready," Merritt said. "Now we find out." They had 2 days. Merritt had learned not to argue with the timber wind, and the timber wind said 2 days. He filled the cistern and every lidded pot that would hold water, because a drift can bury a spring path in an hour, and no one should have to break ice while a child is coming. He carried 3 days of dry firewood into the vestibule and stacked it clear of the stove, split small so it would catch fast. He walked the guide rope hand over hand from the dugout to the cabin and out to the pen, tightening every splice, and where the exposed stretch of it ran open to the flat, he set 2 more posts so no gap was longer than a man's reach in the dark. June walked beside him with her hand on the rope. "Why both the rope and the posts?" she asked. "Isn't one enough?" "A rope keeps a man from drifting off," Merritt said. "The posts tell him whether he's still going somewhere or just holding on to the same spot." He tied the last red tab below the line. "A man can hang on to a rope all night and be no closer to the door. The posts keep him honest." June counted the posts on the way back. 9 to the cabin, 4 to the pen. She said the numbers over to herself until she had them. Ada readied the room the child would be born in. She cut the last good panel of Owen's canvas and hung it as a double curtain around the bed and the chair. The lower edge raised a hand's width off the floor so the room could still breathe under it, a stone screen set between the curtain and the stove where Sloane had made them move the line. She wrapped bricks to warm the bed and set them by the fire to be pulled before they were needed. She checked the vent shutters, the low intake and the high, and moved the greased leather hinge back and forth until she trusted it. Merritt brought two things down from the cabin without being asked. The first was Bess's red wool shawl, out of the cedar chest where it had lain 4 winters, the small repair she had made still holding at one corner. He set it near the bed and did not say whose it had been. Ada did not ask. The second he carried in wrapped in a grain sack, and when he unwrapped it, it was the cradle. Finished. The 2 ash sides June had found joined now with rockers he had cut by candlelight and a floor of woven cord, sanded smooth all over so no splinter could find a newborn skin. He set it behind the curtain, in the warm corner, under the high vent. June looked at it a long time. She did not say it was beautiful. She reached out and set it rocking with one finger, gently, the way you touch a thing you have decided to believe in. Pilar had left instructions on a folded sheet of paper before the passes closed, in a plain hand, the things a man might have to do if no woman reached them in time. Ada made Merritt read them aloud twice, in the daylight, so his hands would know them in the dark. When to wait, when not to, what was ordinary and what was not, what to do with the cord and the cloth. Merritt read them like a man reading a load chart, and Ada corrected his one wrong guess and let the rest stand, and that was the whole of the lesson. Merritt clipped the repair bag to a sliding loop on the guide rope and knotted Owen's latigo strap through the bag's handle, double, the way Owen had taught the leather to hold. Then there was nothing left to ready. The wind died. It went out of the pines and off the flat all at once, and the whole country stood still under the hard, colorless sky, and the goats came in off the pen wall and pressed together, and even the mule stopped pulling at its feed. "That's it," Merritt said. "That's the front breathing in." It came in the 9th hour after the calm. The thermometer by the door had read 51 above at noon, warm enough to work bareheaded. By the time full dark fell, it read below freezing, and the north wind had come down off the mesa like something loosed. Sleet first, hard as sand against the hill. Then the sleet stopped being sleet and became a dry snow that did not fall so much as travel, sideways and fast, filling the air until the lamp in the cabin window blurred and then vanished from the dugout door. Inside the shelter, the room held. June read the glasses aloud, and Ada wrote, "Outside, 4 above and falling. Inside, 61. An hour later, outside, 0. Inside, 60. The earth of the hill gave up its slow warmth. The stove drew clean up the extended pipe. The offset entry took the wind sideways and let none of its pressure into the room, so the flame stood tall, and the door, when Merritt cracked it to look, could still be worked from the inside, though the drift was climbing the hill. Up above, the cabin was not holding as well. The lean-to that sheltered the firewood and the spare roof poles had begun to work in the wind, one corner lifting and slapping down, lifting and slapping down. "Let it go," Ada said when Merritt looked toward it. "We have the wood we need down here. Don't go out for boards." Merritt let it go. June knelt by the front post with the lamp and watched the charcoal line, the one that had saved them once. "Same," she reported. "Same. Same." Then, near midnight, she went quiet, and Merritt came and crouched beside her. Below the repaired beam, in the flickering light, a dark line had appeared along the timber. Merritt could not tell whether it was a shadow thrown by the lamp or the beam itself beginning to move. He held the lamp still. He held his breath. The line did not grow, but it did not go away. Then something struck the outer door. Not the wind. A blow. And another. The flat of a hand or a body. And no voice with it at all. Merritt clipped himself to the guide rope before he opened the door, because a man who steps into a whiteout untied does not come back, and Ada had the ledger open and the lamp high, and did not tell him to be careful, which was her way of telling him. The cold took his breath at the threshold. 0 and dropping, the wind driving the snow so hard he could not see the first post, though he knew it stood 18 feet off. He went hand over hand down the rope, counting knots 3 for the dugout way, and where the branch line split, he took it toward the pen. He found the shape at the second marker. It was Cal Dacey down in the drift, one hand wrapped so tight around the guide rope that the fingers had locked. He had crawled to it from somewhere out on the flat and gone no farther. Merritt got an arm under him. The repair bag on its sliding loop banged against his hip, and a gust caught it and tore it loose from the loop, but the latigo strap held it to the rope, Owen's double stitch not giving, and the bag swung and stayed. Merritt hauled Cal along the line, knot by knot, until the door came out of the white and Ada's lamp was there. They got him in by the stove. Merritt had to pry the frozen fingers off the rope one at a time. Cal's cheeks were gray-white and hard, his lips cracked, and for a while he only shook. Then he said, "I saw the cloth." His voice was a rasp. "Rope was buried, whole line buried, but the red was hanging under it, snapping. I saw the cloth, and I followed the cloth." He got a breath. "You hung them low. Everybody hangs a flag high. You hung them low, under the rope, where the wind couldn't tear them." "They tear less down there," Merritt said, working the man's hands. "That's all." "Rel's line cabin lost its roof," Cal said. "Whole roof, gone in the first hour. He sent me to move cattle ahead of it, and the cattle wouldn't move, and my horse went down in a drift and broke a leg, and I shot it, and I started walking, and I don't—" He stopped. He looked at the low, dark, earth-walled room he had called a grave, warm around him at 60 degrees while the world outside died at 0. "I don't know how you're warm in here." "The hill," Merritt said, "and the air, and her." Behind them, at the table, Ada set down her pen. Her hand had gone flat and still on the ledger. She breathed out slow through her teeth, and June, who had been counting posts to herself, looked up and knew before either man did. "Ma?" June said. "It started," Ada said. "The first one just now." She closed the ledger. "June, get the watch." The birth room was ready because Ada had made it ready, and she would not lie down in it until she had checked it with her own hands. She went along it slow between the first panes, the high vent, the water pots lidded and warm, the curtain hanging clear of the stone screen, the cradle bedding, the lamp wick trimmed, the sand bucket by the stove. Only then did she let Merritt help her behind the canvas and settle her on the bricks-warmed bed with Bess's red shawl folded near her hand. June had Owen's freight watch, the one with the wide face he had used to time his hauls, and she sat where she could see both her mother and the second hand and called the intervals. 9 minutes, she said. Then, later, 7. She did not cry. She had a job, and the job kept her hands still. Cal, warm enough now to move, would not lie idle. "Give me something," he said, so Merritt set him to feeding the vestibule wood inward as it was needed, and the man who had mocked the shelter kept its fire alive. His 2 worst fingers had gone stiff and swollen, and he worked one-handed and did not complain, and once, between arm loads, he said to no one, "Low, you hung them low," as if the fact still surprised him. June kept her count clean, even when her mother's breath went hard. 7 minutes, she said. 6. When Ada gripped the bed rail and made no sound, June did not look away and did not stop the watch. She had learned from a whole winter of charcoal marks that the job was to see the true number and say it, not the kind one. Between the panes, she checked the water pot without being told, and told Merritt when it wanted filling, and he filled it. Merritt heated water and tore clean cloth into the lengths Pilar had named, and did the things a midwife had written down for a night she could not reach. He was steady with his hands and useless with his words, so he kept to his hands. The room grew warm, then it grew too warm. The stove ran hard against the cold, and the four bodies, and the labor filled the air, and moisture began to gather along the ceiling and bead on the cold rear wall, and the lamp, when Merritt glanced at it, had dropped a little in its chimney. "Open the high vent," Ada said, between panes. Merritt looked at the door glass. "It's below 0 out there. We open that vent. We lose heat we can't spare. Open it." Ada's voice did not rise. "Warm is not the same as safe. You built a room that holds heat and holds bad air the same. I told you that the first night, and it's true now. Open the vent 1 finger's width, and the lamp will tell you I'm right." He opened it 1 finger's width. The cold came in a thin thread along the ceiling. The lamp brightened and stood tall. The beaded wet on the walls stopped spreading. The room lost a degree and gained its air back, and Ada breathed easier in it, and June wrote the time. 5 minutes, June said. Then, from above the curtain, from the roof, came a sound that did not belong, a metallic scrape and clang, wind on iron, and then a hammering, steady and wrong, the turning cowl on the stovepipe wrenching itself sideways in a gust it had not been built to take. The lamp guttered. Down the pipe, on the next gust, came the first push of smoke, back into the room, toward the curtain, toward the bed. This was the hour the whole winter had been walking toward. Merritt knew what a reverse draft did in a shut room. He had heard Sloane name it and had lain awake naming it himself. If the cowl stayed sideways, the pipe would push smoke down every time the wind crossed it, and the only cure was to put the fire out. And if the fire went out, the room would fall toward 0 in the last stage of Ada's labor, with a newborn coming into it. Smoke or cold. There was no third thing unless the cowl was set right, and the cowl was on the roof, on the outside, in the storm. "Keep her breathing clean air," Merritt told Cal. "Get her to the low side near the intake and hold the curtain off the screen. June, you count for her, same as now. Don't stop counting." "Where are you going?" June said, though she knew. "Up top, to straighten the iron." He was already pulling on the coat, the gloves, the second wrap. He took the repair bag off its loop, fastened Owen's latigo strap through its handle twice, and clipped the strap to the guide rope so the bag would ride the line and not be lost. Then he put the inside end of the rope into Ada's hands, wound once around her wrist. 3 pulls means I've set it, and I'm coming back," Merritt said. "You feel 3. You know I'm alive and moving. You pull 3 back so I know you felt it. Anything else, you send Cal out on the line after me." "Not you. Cal." Ada closed her hand around the rope. "Straighten the iron," she said, "and come back and open the vent when I tell you." That was as close as either of them came to saying the rest of it. He went out into 8 below. The wind was past 50 in the gusts now. The snow was not falling, it was a solid moving thing, and the drift had climbed the hill so that Merritt came up out of the vestibule near level with the roof. He could not see the stovepipe 6 feet off. He crawled to it by the guide rope and then by feel, the repair bag dragging behind on Owen's strap. He found the cowl by touch, turned crossways on its collar, one fastening hole split clean through where the wind had worked it. The other bolt had held but backed out half its threads. He could not do fine work in the gloves, and he could not keep his fingers past a minute out of them, so he worked in bursts, durchjappern, glove off, Set the shorter bolt in the sound hole and start the thread. Glove on. Wait for the sting to come back. Glove off again. The wind took the heat out of his hand each time faster than the last. For the split hole, there was no bolt that would hold, so he took a length of wire off a trap chain from the bag and wound the joint and twisted it down hard with the pliers, turn after turn, until the cowl no longer moved on its collar. His windward cheek had gone past pain to nothing, which he knew was worse, and he pressed a wooden glove to it and kept turning the wire. A gust came off the flat and drove a loose roof pole out of the failing cabin lean-to across the dark, and it caught Merritt across the shoulder and knocked him flat, and the repair bag tore out of his numb hand. And Owen's strap caught it, the double stitch holding it to the rope, so it swung and stayed within reach instead of gone into the white. He got his hand back on the bag. He finished the wind of wire. The cowl came around square on its collar and held into the wind. He gave the rope 3 pulls. Inside, at the far end of the line, Ada felt 3 tugs come up the rope into her wrist, and she pulled 3 back, and June saw her mother's face change and wrote nothing because there was no number for it. Then the rope went slack in Ada's hand. She pulled. Nothing answered. Slack line, all the way out. Out on the roof, another gust had taken Merritt off his feet and rolled him down the snow-loaded slope of the hill away from the pipe, the guide rope paying out slack behind him. For a moment he was nowhere, no up, no down, only the white and the roar. Then his glove found the line again, where it ran taut to the nearest post, and he followed it hand over hand, post to post, one red cloth snapping below the rope at eye level, then the next, until the black square of the vestibule opened in front of him, and he fell into it out of the wind. He lay in the vestibule and heard, over the storm, the stove behind the inner door draw clean and steady, the smoke going up the straightened pipe and out where it belonged. And behind the canvas curtain, in a room holding warm at 73 degrees on the strength of a hill, a fire, and every failure they had found and fixed in time, a child cried out for the first time. Ada's daughter came into Bess's red shawl, wrapped by Ada's own hands in the wool a dead woman had mended. In the corner of a room, a dead man's canvas kept warm. "Beatrice," Ada said when she could speak. "Beatrice Owen Corder." She did not explain the middle name. She did not have to. One name from each of them carried into the new one. Merritt came in from the vestibule, snow-caked and gray-faced, his shoulder hanging wrong, and he did not look at the baby first. He looked at the front post, at June's charcoal line under the beam. "It hasn't moved," he said. "Morning is enough," Ada said. The Blueknife Norther blew itself out on the 4th morning, and the country it left behind was white and silent and changed. They dug the door clear and stepped out into a still, blinding cold. All 4 of them had come through, and the baby, and the mule stamping in its drift-walled pen, and the 2 goats. The main roof of the dugout stood dead level. Sloane's back wall had wet in one corner and no worse. The wood count, when Ada tallied it, had come in under the ledger's estimate. Merritt walked the whole of it slow. When Cal, grinning through cracked lips, said the shelter had held like a fort, Merritt did not agree with him. "1 marker post is gone," Merritt said. "The chimney fastening split, and I mended it with wire. And wire is not a fix. It's a promise to do better. There's a seep under the vestibule corner. I stored the wood too near the outer door where a drift could have sealed it off, and that high vent was too far from the bed for a laboring woman to reach it herself." He stood looking at his own work. A weakness does not become harmless because the rest held. "No," Ada agreed from the door, the baby against her. "But it doesn't stay a weakness once you've said it out loud and written it down." Sloane came up the cut when the road opened, on the same gray mule, and he did not ask how they had fared. He asked for the ledger. He read it standing in the cold, page by page. The temperatures inside and out, the wood burned, the roof line, the wet wall, the vent positions, the night of the birth in Ada's small square hand. Then he walked the structure and matched the numbers to it. The stone footings, the extended pipe and the wired cowl, the drainage trench, the offset entry with its drift packed high and the door still working, the low intake, the high vent. "People will say the hill kept you," Sloane said at last, "that there's some warmth comes up out of the ground." He tapped the ledger. "There isn't. The hill only slowed what the cold was taking. The stove made the heat, and the air made it safe to breathe, and the drainage kept the roof from coming down wet on top of you. Earth, fire, and air, and a woman who wrote down every time one of them failed before it could kill her." He handed the book back to Ada, not to Merritt. "It held because you recorded what failed before the storm arrived. I'll sign it a sound emergency dwelling, so long as somebody keeps checking that roof line and that drain." He looked at June. "You the one keeps the roof line?" "Yes, sir," June said. "Then keep it," Sloane said, and that was his blessing. Cal Dacey did not ride back to Rel's ruined outfit right away. He went out first, alone, and set a new post where the lost marker had been, and hung on it a strip of red cloth cut from his own neckerchief, tied low under the rope, the way Merritt had hung the others. He never once more called the place a prairie grave. August Rel came last of all, a week on, when the drifts had settled. He had lost cattle driven against a fence corner and a roof off a line cabin, and some of his certainty with them. He got down off his horse this time. He did not apologize. That was not in him. He walked to the dugout and stood looking at the drift still packed high against the offset entry and the door standing open and working behind it. "How far apart are the posts?" Rel said. "On your rope line." 18 feet, Merritt said. "Closer where it's exposed." Rel grunted. He crouched and looked at the low intake vent on the sheltered side, the thing that had kept them breathing, and then at the high vent at the far end, and Merritt could see the man doing sums in his head about his own roofless cabin and the men he kept. "A vent low and a vent high," Rel said, half to himself. "Not one big hole. 2 small ones, one each end." "A room needs air to come in somewhere and go out somewhere else," Merritt said. "One hole and it just fights itself." "Show me," Rel said. "The whole of it, the footings and the drain and the iron." And Merritt showed him all of it, and Ada showed him the ledger, and Rel did not thank them and did not offer for the spring again, and rode off at dusk with a winter's worth of other men's proof in his head. It was not friendship. It was the nearest thing to respect a man like Rel had to give, and Merritt took it as it was meant. Ada meant to leave in the spring. She said it plainly once the passes cleared, the way she said everything. Owen's claim still stood filed to the east. Her debt at Cinderbreak Hold was paid twice over, and she was not a woman who stayed on past a paid debt. She would take June and Beatrice and the mule and reopen the ground her husband had died reaching for. Merritt did not argue with her. He went to Sloane instead, and to Pilar, and had them witness a paper, and then he put it on the table in front of Ada with the ledger. It was a partnership in the claim. Ada named to legal occupancy and a share of what Cinderbreak brought in. The household and the supply accounts hers to keep, the trapping and the timber his, and any matter touching the spring or the shelter or the children needing both their names to decide. And first on the paper, before her share and before his, June and Beatrice guaranteed a home on the claim for as long as they wanted one, whatever came to pass between the 2 grown people who had signed it. Ada read it twice. She put her finger on the children's names written first. "Why them before me?" she said. "Before you. I'm not giving them what was mine," Merritt said. "I'm naming what they already carried in the door." Ada set the paper down. She looked at the stove, where 2 tin cups stood on the stone shelf as they had every morning through the winter. "I can stay until the ground opens," she said. "Stay until the grass comes back," Merritt said. Ada waited. "Longer would be useful," Merritt said. Ada took down the second cup, which she had drunk from since her first day of labor at the claim, and she set it beside his on the shelf, close, and then she took down a third small that June used and set it beside them. That was the whole of it. Neither of them said another word about staying. The wedding came in late spring, a small civil thing in the cabin with the door open to the green and the spring running full below the hill. Sloane witnessed it and read the words off a card and put his mark to the paper with the same care he gave a load chart. Pilar held Beatrice through the whole of it and did not offer one sentimental word, which was her gift. When it was done, she handed the baby not to Ada but to Merritt and watched to see if his arms knew what to do, and they did. And she nodded once the way Sloane nodded at a sound roof. Cal Dacey mended the mule pen gate that had hung crooked all winter and called it his present, and would not be thanked. August Rel did not come, but 2 straight-peeled roof timbers appeared one morning laid beside the wagon cut to a good length, from no one, and Merritt carried them in and said nothing, and used them. June found Merritt at the bench a few days after, building a table long enough for 4 to sit at and grow into. "Pa," she said, "hold the end so I can measure it." She did not test the word first. She had used it once in the birth room in the dark, telling him to hold the baby's head, and no one had corrected her then, and she had not needed to try it out since. It was simply his name now. Merritt held the end of the board while June ran the stick along it and marked it true, twice, the same both times. And Beatrice, in Bess's finished cradle under the vent, Bess would have checked, opened her hand toward the man leaning over the workbench when June leaned in and said his name, and reached. By the 3rd night of the Blueknife Norther, Cinderbreak Hold had vanished, and it did not come through because the hill was kind. The hill was not kind. The cold fell to 8 below and killed cattle a mile off and took the roof from a rich man's cabin, and it would have taken them too. It did not because the earth only slows what winter tries to take, and everything else had to be built. The stove needed air. The roof needed stone beneath its posts. The water needed somewhere else to go. Every strength on that claim stood next to a weakness that someone had been willing to name out loud and write down before the storm could find it first. Merritt had pulled Ada out of the wind. Ada had taught him that sealing every opening was only a slower way to suffocate. Neither of them had saved the other alone, and that was the truth that outlasted the winter. Bess's red shawl lay folded over Owen's canvas curtain. Owen's latigo strap hung on its peg above the mended tool bag. 3 cups waited on the stone shelf by the stove, and a 4th, smaller still, warmed near it now. Under the high vent, Beatrice slept in the cradle a dead woman never finished, and a living man did. And June stood at the front post with her charcoal stub, reaching up to make a new mark on the beam, not because the roof had moved, but because she had grown tall enough over one winter to reach a little higher than before.